They always told me that only the church truly honors Jesus. But the day I opened the Qur'an, I realized something no one had prepared me for. Islam was protecting his honor in a way I had never seen before. Like many others, I assumed that the Qur'an either ignored Jesus or reduced his importance. But as I turned the pages, I was shocked to find his name appearing again and again, spoken with reverence, surrounded by stories of miracles, purity, and divine purpose. It felt as though Islam had been preserving his dignity all along, while I had been looking in the wrong place. The Qur'an describes Mary, his mother, as the most honored woman to ever walk the earth. An entire chapter is named after her, and her story is told in detail with respect that moved me deeply. No distortion, no hidden shame, only honor, purity, and the miraculous birth of her son as a sign of God's limitless power. Then came the verses about Jesus himself. Instead of being portrayed as humiliated or overpowered, he is shown as a mighty messenger, chosen and supported by God. His miracles are described vividly: healing the sick, giving sight to the blind, even giving life to clay birds, all by God's permission. His story was not one of weakness, but one of constant divine support. The Qur'an even went further. It denied that Jesus was ever crucified or killed by his enemies, a claim that shocked me at first. But when I reflected on it, I realized it was protecting his honor, saving him from humiliation and preserving him for a greater purpose. It spoke of his return, a promise that his mission was not ended in tragedy, but would continue until justice is fulfilled. In that moment, I realized something: life changing. The Qur'an doesn't just respect Jesus, it safeguards his story. It honors him in ways even churches rarely do, as a prophet, a servant of God, a man of miracles, and a sign for all humanity. One of the first things that shocked me when I opened the Qur'an was how highly it speaks of Mary, the mother of Jesus. Growing up, I thought respect for Mary was unique to churches, but the Qur'an gave her an honor unlike anything I had ever encountered before. Not only does it mention her frequently, but it even dedicates an entire chapter to her, Surah Maryam. This alone was enough to make me pause. Out of all the women in history, she is the only one named directly in the Qur'an, and her story is preserved with purity, dignity, and immense respect. The Qur'an describes how Mary was chosen by God above all women, purified, and entrusted with one of the greatest miracles in human history, giving birth to Jesus without a father. Her devotion, her faith, and her courage are highlighted in detail. Even in her moments of struggle, when she faced the pain of childbirth alone, the Qur'an shows God comforting her and providing her with sustenance. That image struck me deeply: a woman abandoned by society, yet embraced by her Creator in the most intimate way. What amazed me most was how the Qur'an protects Mary's reputation. While false accusations were thrown at her by her people, God defended her through the miraculous words of her newborn son, Jesus, speaking from the cradle. This detail is absent from the Christian tradition, yet it perfectly preserves her dignity. It showed me that Islam does not just honor Jesus, it also safeguards the woman who bore him. And when I compared this with how Mary is treated in many churches, I realized something profound. While she is respected, her story is often overshadowed or minimized in Christian teachings. In contrast, the Qur'an elevates her to the highest rank among women, making her an eternal symbol of faith, purity, and divine favor. Reading this, I understood that the Qur'an doesn't just honor Mary for being the mother of Jesus. It honors her for her devotion to God, her strength in the face of trials, and her role as an example for all believers. In that moment, I realized Islam was protecting both Jesus and Mary in a way I had never truly seen before. The Qur'an's description of Jesus' birth is one of the most beautiful and powerful passages I had ever read, and it left me speechless. I grew up hearing about the virgin birth in church, but the Qur'an's narration carried a level of clarity and honor that I never expected. It wasn't presented as a mystery to be debated or a puzzle of theology. It was described as a miraculous sign of God's power, meant to inspire faith in people across time. The Qur'an tells us that Mary was approached by an angel who delivered the extraordinary news she would bear a son, even though no man had ever touched her. Confused, she asked how this could be possible. The angel's reply is both profound and simple. God creates what he wills. When he decrees a matter, he only says to it, "Be," and it is. These words struck me deeply. They stripped away all confusion and made it clear that Jesus' birth was not about human logic, but about God's limitless ability to create. What moved me most was how the Qur'an tied this miracle to God's greatness rather than turning it into a theological argument. It drew a direct parallel. Just as Adam was created without a father or mother, Jesus was created without a father. Both were signs of God's power, not evidence of divinity. For the first time, I saw the virgin birth not as something to confuse believers, but as a reminder that God is in control of creation in every form. Even more powerful was the way the Qur'an protected Mary's dignity through this event. Instead of her being left vulnerable to disgrace, God reassured and supported her in her moment of trial. The miraculous nature of her son's birth became her defense against accusations and her shield from shame. Reading this, I realized the Qur'an doesn't diminish Jesus' birth. It magnifies it. It honors Mary as chosen and pure, and it presents Jesus as a miraculous sign of God's will. In that moment, I saw that Islam preserves the virgin birth with clarity, respect, and purpose, turning it into a story of divine power rather than human confusion. One of the most eye-opening truths I found in the Qur'an was how it described Jesus as a prophet and servant of God. At first, this challenged everything I had been taught. Growing up, I was told to see Jesus as divine, as part of God himself. But when I read the Qur'an, I saw a completely different perspective, one that was clear, respectful, and incredibly powerful. The Qur'an shows that Jesus never claimed divinity. Instead, he consistently pointed people back to the worship of the one true God. His mission was the same as that of Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Muhammad, to guide humanity to faith, obedience, and righteousness. One verse in particular struck me when Jesus speaks as a baby. He declares, "I am the servant of God. He has given me the scripture and made me a prophet." This was breathtaking to read. Even from the cradle, his identity was tied not to being worshipped, but to worshiping God and fulfilling his mission. This view didn't lower his status. It elevated it. It showed me that being called a servant of God is not a weakness, but the highest honor a human being can receive. Every prophet in Islam is remembered for their humility, their devotion, and their obedience to God's will. And Jesus, according to the Qur'an, stands among the greatest of them. What surprised me most was how this perspective removed the confusion I always felt in church. In Christianity, the idea of Jesus being both fully God and fully man never made sense to me. The Qur'an simplified it. Jesus was a man, a prophet, and a servant of the Creator. His greatness lay not in claiming divinity, but in his perfect submission to God. For me, this was liberating. It honored Jesus in a way that felt authentic and pure. He was not placed above humanity in an unreachable way, but presented as an example of humility, devotion, and faith. The Qur'an protected his true role and gave him the dignity of being one of God's mightiest messengers. When I read the Qur'an's verses about Jesus' miracles, I expected only vague references, but instead, I found powerful and detailed accounts. The Qur'an confirms miracles I had already heard of, like healing the blind, curing lepers, and even raising the dead. But what truly surprised me was how the Qur'an framed these miracles. They were never presented as proof of Jesus' own power, but always described as happening by God's permission. This phrase appeared again and again, making it clear that Jesus was not acting independently, but as a servant of God, carrying out his will. One miracle in particular struck me. The Qur'an describes Jesus as a child shaping a bird out of clay, and then by God's permission, breathing life into it so it flew away. I had never heard this story before. It was a detail that showed both his uniqueness and his reliance on God at the same time. It wasn't about elevating him to the status of God, but about confirming him as a chosen prophet given extraordinary signs. What impressed me most was the balance in the Qur'an's account. It didn't deny the greatness of Jesus' miracles, but it also didn't exaggerate them to the point of turning him into something he never claimed to be. Instead, it honored him as one of God's mightiest messengers, supported with signs that pointed people back to the Creator. Every miracle was a message, not of Jesus' divinity, but of God's power working through him. This perspective completely reshaped how I understood his mission. Instead of seeing miracles as proof of Jesus being God, I began to see them as signs of his closeness to God, his faith, and his role as a prophet. The Qur'an protects his honor by presenting his miracles truthfully, as extraordinary acts, but always rooted in God's will. Reading this left me in awe because it gave Jesus respect without distortion. It showed me that his miracles were not about glorifying him as divine, but about glorifying the one who sent him. The Quran's description of how God protected Jesus from harm was unlike anything I had ever read before. Growing up, I was taught that the crucifixion was the central story, that Jesus died on the cross, and that was the ultimate proof of his mission. But when I read the Quran, I saw a completely different narrative, one that actually elevated his honor rather than diminishing it. The Quran states that Jesus was never killed, nor was he crucified. Instead, it only appeared that way to people. God raised him up, protecting him from his enemies and preserving his mission. At first, this challenged everything I thought I knew, but then it started to make sense. If Jesus was truly chosen by God, why would God allow his enemies to defeat him so humiliatingly? The Quran's account wasn't a denial of Jesus. It was the ultimate defense of his dignity. It showed that God's plan was always greater than human schemes and that his prophets are never left unprotected. Even more striking is the Quran's teaching that Jesus is not gone forever. He was raised, and he will return before the end of time. This promise shows that his mission is not yet complete and that he has a role in guiding humanity once again. Unlike the idea of him being abandoned on the cross, this account gives Jesus unmatched honor. Not only was he protected, but he was chosen to return as a sign of the final chapter in human history. This changed everything for me. The Quran's view doesn't strip Jesus of importance. It does the opposite. It preserves his dignity, defends his mission, and gives him a place of honor in both the past and the future. It showed me that Islam doesn't minimize Jesus, it magnifies his role in God's plan. That realization made me pause. The Quran was not rejecting Jesus. It was protecting him in ways I had never imagined. And for the first time, I felt like I was reading a version of his story that gave him the respect he truly deserves. When I first opened the Quran, I didn't expect to find Jesus' name shining across its pages. I didn't expect to find honor, love, and respect for him woven into the very fabric of Islam. Yet every verse I read told a story that was far different from what I had been told. Instead of rejection, I found protection. Instead of denial, I found dignity. Instead of silence, I found a clear and powerful voice honoring Jesus as one of the greatest messengers of God. And that's what struck me the most. The Quran wasn't hiding Jesus. It was protecting him. Protecting his birth from being misunderstood, protecting his mission from being distorted, protecting his words from being misquoted, and even protecting his ending from being turned into humiliation. It showed me a Jesus who was loved by God, supported by miracles, defended from his enemies, and promised to return to fulfill the final part of his mission. This wasn't the Jesus I had grown up hearing about in church sermons. This was a Jesus whose honor could never be compromised. Islam's portrayal of him was clear, consistent, and free from confusion. And it made me realize something that shook me to my core. If Muslims are taught to respect, love, and even believe in Jesus, then Islam isn't far from him. It's closer than many Christians imagine. So here's the truth I walked away with. The Quran honors Jesus in ways that even the church has not. It preserves his dignity from the beginning of his life to his promised return. It refuses to let him be seen as weak, defeated, or humiliated, and it gives him a place of honor that no one can take away. For me, this wasn't just information, it was transformation. It showed me that Islam doesn't push Jesus aside. It preserves his true story. And maybe, just maybe, that's the forgotten truth the world needs to hear. If you've ever wondered what Islam really says about Jesus, don't take anyone's word for it. Open the Quran yourself. Read the verses. See the honor, the respect, and the truth with your own eyes. You might just realize, as I did, that Jesus is honored here more than anywhere else.